And I think I asked you before we sat down, are you getting into NFTs at all? Is somebody
I
talking?
haven't, but I'm usually a little late jumping into the water.
Has Kiss been involved in
No,
NFTs?
no,
No,
we've just been kind of sitting on the sidelines, um, watching other people dip their toes in the water. But
because you are the kings of brand.
we are the most merchandise band in history, and
Is that true?
yeah, I say that proudly. Um, yeah, it's it, there were bands who
More than the Beatles.
yes,
That makes sense. That makes sense to me. Because if you're buying merchandise and even like the Halloween costumes that I would see, everything, you would buy the wigs, the makeup, the shoes, I saw more Kiss merchandise growing up and even now than I ever saw of the Beatles.
Wow.
and believe me, the Beatles live in rarefied air, so there's no comparison, in terms of what the Beatles have accomplished. But yeah, we maximized and have always tried to maximize our connection to our audience. I think some bands, look, you couldn't do that with. I'm not going to name bands because
Please do.
they're boring. As far as
Who's the most boring band in your mind?
How you're trying to lead me down a path that I'll regret.
I just want some clickbait.
Yes, yeah. You already got it.
I know.
But that's why you're still selling out these
This is amazing.
18,000, 20,000.
He just came in from Australia. He's
I'm
just
going to Australia this coming week. I just came back from Europe.
And how big are the audiences?
There was 100,000, there was 80,000, and then prior to that, we were home for about 2 weeks, and before that, we were in South America doing the same thing, doing stadiums and.
How long has Kiss been banned?
Almost
1970,
50,
right? Or
1973, so almost 50 years.
That's crazy because I'd imagine ticket sales nowadays are way harder than ticket sales when you first started for like newer bands, newer groups, newer people. I don't hear those kind of numbers at all from anyone.
Well, the interesting part of this is that a lot of the newer talent that comes along, many of them came along with instant success. Look, AGT is wonderful, Idol is wonderful, but you can't go from those shows to filling an arena or a stadium because people don't expect you to be able to entertain a crowd of that size. When we started out, like when you started out, I'm sure you start at the bottom. You learn your craft and you work your way up to being a headliner. Well, if you're not given that opportunity and you're just thrown into the deep end of the pool, you're going to have a hard time swimming.
But the amazing thing about what you guys are doing now is now.
Yeah.
In 2022, you're looking out at 80,000 people after 50 years. And how many people have lasted that long?
Well, I think part of the beauty of it for me is that we're not playing to a blue-haired audience. In other words, we're playing to multi-generations and primarily, I would say mid-20s to 30s and younger. You see, it's kind of like Lion King. People are holding up their kids. You have a 6-year-old with his father and his father, and they all want to experience that magic that they saw and that affected them in such a profound way. So.
Is Kiss writing a lot of new music?
No.
Why?
Because it can, at this point, I came to the conclusion that it can never compete with the past. Not because it's not as good, but it hasn't the connection to important times in your life. It doesn't have that patina to it of, gee, I remember I heard this song when I was 18, or I heard this song when I was on my first date or whatever. You can't compete with that. It's more than a song. It's a snapshot of your life at a certain point.
But your life is still happening.
Yes, but look, we did 2 albums in the last, I think, probably 10 years, And there's songs on those that are every bit as good as anything I've ever written, but they're new. So somebody says, why don't you do a new album? You do a new album, you do a song. We had one song, Modern Day Delilah, which is as good as Love Gun or any of these songs, but it hasn't aged. It's not like wine that has a chance to have grow in importance, not just because of what it is, but because what it's surrounded by.
But that can still happen. It's
Well,
out there. Somebody can sample it, somebody can use
Right.
it, or it
So-
can play in a movie.
Yes, and that's great. But as far as, I think it builds in for me as it's setting myself up for disappointment, not crushing disappointment, but when you put your heart and soul into doing something and it kind of gets a polite nod. There's other things I'd rather do.
And do you find joy in creating new music anymore? It sounds like you're looking towards doing stuff that creates joy for you, whether it be the art, whether it be the Phantom of the Opera. Is that something that you enjoy doing?
It's totally about, at this point, it's about what makes me happy.
Yeah.
And that should be everybody's mantra. Doc McGee, my manager and good friend, he coined a phrase that for me only becomes more important. QTR, quality time remaining. And
Wow.
that's what life's about, Look, at one point in my life, I always saw life as kind of like a moving sidewalk, and everybody was in front of me. Well, now I look and everybody's behind me. So it's like, what are you going to do with your time? What are you going to do that matters to you and the people around you? So
Do you enjoy being on stage
I love being on
in
stage.
front of 80,000 people?
That's where I live.
So why has Kiss announced a farewell tour?
Because physically we can't continue to do it indefinitely. Look, if I was on stage like this, I'll do it into my 80s, 90s, but I'm carrying around 40, 50 pounds of gear and running around on stage for 2.5 hours, making it look easy. And, at some point you have to go, I'm not going to be able to do this. So it's really,
Are you in pain?
I've had enough surgeries.
You've had hip replacements, right?
I had a hip replacement. Again, look, everything comes with a price, and I'm perfectly happy with what I've paid. I've had both my knees operated on. I've had rotator cuffs on both shoulders repaired. I popped a bicep tendon. I've had a hip replacement.
How do you get it injured? And you think it's because of the
Oh,
performances?
totally. No, look, I just turned 70.
Wow.
There's no basketball players. There's no football players. There's no athletes. Forget about 70, 50, 45. So yeah, it's all my close doctor friends. Yeah, it's part of what I do. And
Wow.
and I'm blessed to be able to have.
Will it be incredibly depressing for you when it's too painful to get up on stage?
I won't be at that point ever. It'll be finished before then. I don't want to see that kind of situation, and I don't want the audience to see that kind of situation. That's
I
not
know one of the most depressing things I just saw, and I'm not knocking or putting him down in any way, but Phil Collins' last tour. Did you see that? He's in a wheelchair.
I saw videos.
That was really hard to watch as a fan.
But my point of view on that is whether it's an athlete or a performer, they have the right to continue doing
I'm not
what makes them happy.
right.
And you have the right to not go.
Right.
But people who go, gee, I wish he wouldn't be up there doing that because I want to remember him. Well, don't go.
Right.
They've already fulfilled not only what mattered to them, but you're giving you so much joy. The idea that, well, now
It was just empathy. It wasn't like he ruined something for me. I just felt bad as another human being watching somebody and maybe putting myself wrongly into his mind, going like he loved drumming and he loved performing. He's still singing and his voice is great, but he couldn't barely move and it looked so painful. And I just felt bad, not cheated.
He may feel grateful for what he can still do.
Glass half full, buddy.
Totally.
You
Hey,
guys are the opposite.
To me, the glass is always overflowing. You know, I'm half empty, half full. No. Every day is a miracle.
Are you happy?
So happy.
Really?
Yeah, really, really happy. And wasn't always. But, you know, when you reach that point, if you reach that point, it's wonderful.
Do you have any regrets?
None.
None.
None.